Alright guys, so today we're going to be covering a miracle. We haven't talked about miracles on this channel before, but this is a special one. It's actually the biggest sighting of Saint Mary in history. And it is one of the most recent ones as well, happening in 1968. This happened in the land of Egypt. This occurred over the time of 3 years. Now, this video is going to be covering miracles associated with this sighting, and we're going to be reading through some testimonies. Let's get into the video. Now, Egypt has a rich history of Christianity. In the Gospels, we read that Saint Mary, Saint Joseph, and baby Jesus actually went to Egypt. Now, this was because of King Herod, which wanted to kill all the children under the age of 2. So the Holy Family went into Egypt. Now, they did journey throughout Egypt. They didn't just stay in one place. But one of the places they stayed in was Cairo. This is the capital of Egypt. Now, this church, which the apparition of Saint Mary occurred on in 1968, is one of the areas that Saint Mary stayed in. What's interesting is the church was built by a businessman. This businessman had an idea to build something else. And before he went through with it, Saint Mary appeared to him and told him to build a church there. And she said that in 40 years she would come and visit this church. So this apparition happened to this man in 1925. And in 1968, the apparition occurred. To get into the details of this apparition, it was 8:30 a.m. on April 2nd, 1968. The first people who witnessed this were actually Muslim. They were workers across the road in a mechanic shop. The first one that came out, his name was Abdul Aziz Ali. Now he saw a bright light on top of the church. And not sure what it was, he yelled out, "A light over the dome." Now, he's gone out and he pointed. Now, this finger that he pointed with was bandaged. This is going to be a detail for later on. And there are 3 other workers with him in the garage. They came out and they saw, and groups started to build. People started to all see the same thing. Now, some people worried that this young lady was going to jump off the church. They were yelling out, "No, don't jump off, don't jump off." They were coming outside. Bigger groups gathered, more people gathered. And through the testimonies I'm going to read to you, you're going to see the level of detail that they were able to see. There are details of these people who actually could see Saint Mary's teeth, her eyes. So very, very detailed apparition. And again, this happened over the course of 3 years, from 1968 to 1971. In the town of Zaytun in Cairo. These testimonies I'm about to read to you, I'll provide the resources because there are plenty of eyewitness accounts. There are books written about this. It was in newspaper articles. It was known around the world. Because this miracle, and actually I'll say it now before I start the video, to anyone that has been impacted by this miracle, which is not Egyptian, because I know so many people, they have their grandparents who experienced this and they know someone in the family, but anyone who is not Egyptian, that actually has family members or friends or someone that they know who traveled to Egypt to see this miracle, I would love for you to leave a comment, and I want to read these comments because I'm very interested in how many people actually went from overseas to see this miracle. In Francis Johnson's booklet called Zaytun, he says that rush hour was over and the only sign of activity in the gathering dusk was a solitary car and several women pedestrians in the lamplit street. Suddenly, there was an unexpected movement on the middle dome of the church which attracted the attention of the women. 2 of the workmen by the garage gate put down their mugs and tea and stared up in mute disbelief at what seemed to be a white lady kneeling beside the cross at the top of the dome. There was a flurry of agitated whispering, shot through with a rising tremor of alarm. One of the workmen, Farouk Muhammad Atwa, a Muslim, pointed with a bandaged finger which he was due to have amputated the next day as a result of gangrene, and cried out with compelling urgency, believing it was a girl about to commit suicide, "Lady, do not jump, don't jump." Impelled by a sense of desperation, he dashed off to call the fire brigade and rescue squad, while several of his companions ran across the street to summon a priest, a Father Constantine Musa. In Farouk's own words, "We saw a figure dressed in white on top of the dome of the church. I thought she was going to commit suicide and shouted to her to be careful. My friend called the police and I woke up the doorkeeper. He comes out and looks and cries, 'It is the Virgin,' and runs to the priest." The parish priest, Father Musa, he describes his experience. "I was at home, only steps from the church, when Ibrahim, the doorkeeper, came in very distressed, saying Saint Mary has appeared on the dome. I went myself and saw an illuminated half body of Saint Mary. Some of the bus depot workers directed spotlights in her direction, but she illumined more." Back to Johnson's account. "At that moment the lady rose to her feet, revealing herself as a luminous being dressed in shimmering robes of light. One of the women below cried out with electrifying comprehension, 'Our Lady Mary!' Hardly had the cry escaped her lips when a flight of glowing white doves seemed to appear from nowhere and hover around the apparition. After several moments the extraordinary tableau faded into darkened sky, leaving the spectators stupefied and speechless." This is taken from a book commissioned by the Coptic Orthodox Church on the 50th anniversary in 2018. It says, "The policemen arrived quickly, and a crowd of passers-by began to gather. As the crowd gathered, the girl's appearance started to change. The scene that was revealed to the crowd showed a beautiful girl surrounded by a white, heavenly light, clothed in a white robe and holding branches of olive tree in her hand. Suddenly, a swarm of pure white doves flew over her head, and it was at this moment that they all realized this scene was of spiritual, heavenly origin." In his book by Father Daniel Fanous, he writes, "A crowd began to gather. The police arrived and attempted to disperse them, stating that the so-called apparition was merely an illusion, caused by the reflection of the adjacent streetlights. They duly proceeded to break the offending lights, but the apparition only became more intense." An American professor of anthropology from the university in Cairo investigated these scenes, and this is what she wrote about it. "According to those I later interviewed who were present during those first few hours and days, the police did arrive on the scene, and the police chief attempted to disperse the crowds, saying that the so-called apparition was but the reflection of the lights from the street lamps, and commenced to break the lights. The light of the dome remained, and the vision of the Virgin became even clearer. The police chief became frightened and said that he wanted nothing more to do with this, while others came closer to be sure of what they saw. Thus reported a Coptic woman in her early 50s who witnessed the apparition alongside her two teenage daughters." And according to the Coptic Patriarchate's book, it says, "In order to be certain beyond any doubt, they aimed lights at the luminous image, but it only increased in brightness and clarity. Then they broke the street lights located close to the church, but the luminous image did not disappear. Finally, they turned off the lights in the whole area, but the girl in her heavenly splendor and her luminous robe only appeared more clearly, and she began moving in a circle of light that radiated from her body onto all of her surroundings. It became clear to everyone that the girl in front of them was undoubtedly the Virgin Saint Mary. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause with shouts and cheers, 'She's the Virgin, she's the Mother of Light,' reaching to the sky. Then the crowd started to sing, chant, and pray throughout the night until the next morning." Now, as we're reading these testimonies of how many people were there, what they were seeing, how it all occurred, one thing to note, that this is happening over the span of 3 years. This is the initial sighting. And the police did cut power off to the town. They cut power off to prove that because it's a Muslim country, they're trying to show that, no, this isn't St. Mary on top of a church. Of course not. However, this failed. And one of the accounts says that the longest apparition of St. Mary on top of this church was a span of 2.5 hours. The biggest crowd in attendance, because the longer these things happened, the more it became famous and more well known. It was in newspapers in America, it was known throughout all of Europe, and people were coming. And the longest apparition was 2.5 hours, and the most people in attendance in one night was 250,000 people. So there were regularly tens of thousands attending this, upwards of 100,000, but the most was 250,000. And over the course of 3 years, it's counted that there were 1 million people seeing this miracle. Now, I will get into the healings that have occurred with this miracle as well. Now, Eric Willett, on his book on parapsychology, writes, "There were only a few witnesses the first day, as it was a completely unexpected event. It eventually grew to a very large gathering. Neil interviewed a witness stating that there were about 100 people on the night of 13th of April 1968. Nelson estimated that there were between 1,000 and 1,500 people on the 15th of April 1968. After that, the phenomenon was discussed for the first time in the mainstream press. Through the 23rd of April 1968 article in the Arabic language newspaper Watani, the crowd grew significantly. The Bishop Athanasios estimated that there were 100,000 people gathering at the night of 29th to 30th of April. It finally reached an estimated 250,000 nightly onlookers after a few weeks, according to Johnson. By the end of 1968, it was estimated that the crowd was down to 10,000 people nightly." Now, this resource talks about a skeptic. He was a surgeon in Cairo, and this is what he writes. "A patient of mine upon whom I had operated 2 years ago for cancer returned to my office 3 weeks ago for a checkup. Upon examination, I discovered that the man had another tumor. I actually felt the tumor during the internal examination and removed a piece of tissue for biopsy. When the test showed it was malignant, I recommended an immediate operation, but the man refused, saying he did not have enough money, and he left the office. 2 weeks later, he returned and asked for another examination. To my astonishment, I could not find the tumor, but only some white scar tissue. The man told me that he had gone to Zaytun and prayed to the Virgin for help. I do not believe in such miracles, but I cannot explain the disappearance of the tumor, and it is driving me mad." Another one is the man that first witnessed the miracle. Earlier in this video, I was stating that his finger, which he pointed at the Virgin Mary with, that was wrapped, he had gangrene and was due to have it operated on the next day. And when he went to the hospital the next day, when the doctors uncovered it, they looked and it was completely healed. And there's even footage that we have from Coptic Orthodox priests in Egypt talking about their experience when they saw it themselves. And this is why this miracle is such an amazing thing, because there are people around us now to this day which have seen this miracle. So your grandparents, their generation of Egyptians, have witnessed this, and people from all around the world who came to see this miracle have also witnessed it themselves. Now let's see what the Coptic priest has to say.
"We had a man who was very crippled. His hands were paralyzed and his back was bent, and he could barely speak. At approximately 7 o'clock in the evening, I saw him begin to move his hands and then his fingers, and then the rest of his body. Before long, he threw his canes from his hands and began to run around the church, blessing God, because now he was healed."
Another story of healing is told by witness and author Pearl Zaki.
One girl named Teresa Galila had polio when she was about 6 months old. She could drag her legs with crutches, and she was healed at Zaytun. And I had seen her walking.
There were other miracles seen as well. The late Bishop Gregorios, during a private interview, told of doves the size of angels that would appear and disappear over the church.
Before they disappeared, they dispersed like cotton.
Bishop Gregorios saw many doves at many different times over the church.
Sometimes there were 7, sometimes there were 12, and they were in a formation.
Bishop Gregorios also witnessed several healings at Zaytun, including one Muslim woman who was spectacularly healed after paralysis after visiting the church during the apparition. She visited the bishop to show him how the miracle had affected her life.
With a stick in her hand, she said, "I am bringing this stick with me, not because I need it anymore, but to convince you that I was paralyzed, and I was depending on this stick, and now I don't need it."
I want to finish this video by saying a lot of American evangelicals, they like using this saying, which is facts over feelings, or facts don't care about your feelings. Now, if you claim to be a truth seeker, if you claim to be interested in looking at evidence without any bias and analyzing it and following it where it takes you, this is an example to demonstrate how honest you are in seeking the truth. So we have here all these accounts. This is 10% of what I found, and there's much more that I didn't even look for. Go look for it yourself. Go look at the evidence. Go see how many people were healed by this event. There is no way to explain this away scientifically. There is no mass hallucination. There is nothing that can explain this. So now, your narrative, your theology that attacks the Virgin Mary, that attacks the Holy Theotokos, where is this theology standing up against this event? This regular woman, this average person in the life of Jesus. She's his mother, but she's not that important, apparently. What do you have to say to this? I challenge you, my brothers and sisters, to research this event. Follow where the evidence takes you, because Saint Mary is the mother of God, the mother of Jesus Christ. She's a special person in the story of salvation. Now, honoring the mother of God is not worshipping her. It is not idolatry, as we get accused of all the time. We are actually fulfilling Luke chapter 1, verse 48, when Saint Mary calls out and says that all generations henceforth will call me blessed. Do you in your church call Saint Mary blessed? Do you sing praises to her for what she has done for mankind, bearing the second person of the Trinity in her womb and giving birth to the Logos? Or do you regard her as just one figure amongst many, nothing special? How does this situation add up? Now, a video I was watching on this had a Protestant go through all the details of the miracle and through the evidence, and he himself admits, I'll play the clip for you now, he admits it made him uncomfortable.
Look, I say as a Protestant, I really don't know what to think of this. I think that the evidence for this being the Virgin Mary is interesting. I don't know if I would say it's overwhelming, but I think it's considerable. And I don't know what to make of that with my theology. I'm a non-denominational Christian. I don't have a view of the Marian dogmas. But I would be lying if I said this didn't sometimes make me lose sleep, especially when you look at certain dogmas that say, he who denies the Assumption of Mary will suffer the wrath of Peter and Paul and him on Judgment Day. So I admit that this makes me uncomfortable, and I don't know what to do with it, but I think it's really interesting and not something that should just be hand waved away. So, but I also just have no good, I don't think that any of the natural explanations I've seen are good at all. And I think when you have a combination of not just a light, but a mysterious light that has no known origin, combined with the religious context, combined with the healings, combined with the weird doves, combined with the appearance of the Virgin Mary in the photos, all of that to me just raises not only an eyebrow, but maybe makes me tilt the scale in the other direction. So I think that that's fascinating.
Now, what are you going to do with your discomfort, my Protestant friends? God bless you. I pray that you're honest in your search for truth and that you follow it where it takes you. God bless you guys. I'll see you in the next one.